Welcome back. Okay, let's jump right into the source material today because we're tackling something, well, a bit puzzling. Why is it that sometimes the people who don't seem, traditionally book smart end up achieving just massive financial success?
Yeah, it's that disconnect, isn't it? You look at someone like, say, Kim Kardashian or Richard Branson dropping out of school at 15, and you compare that to folks with multiple degrees.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder, why doesn't academic success always equal big money?
Exactly. We're kind of taught our whole lives that smarts, grades, that's the ticket to wealth. But the research you brought in really throws a wrench in that idea, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The numbers are pretty surprising, actually. There's this big study looking at U.S. millionaires, their average college GPA, 2.9 out of 5.
2.9, wow.
Wow.
Okay, well, it's solid, but it's not exactly the straight A average you might picture for, hyper successful people.
Right. And some other research even hinted that for certain intelligence tests, higher earners actually scored a bit lower than people earning less.
Huh. That's really interesting. So it suggests success isn't just about raw brain power. Maybe it's more about how you use your intelligence or like what else you focus on besides just grades.
That seems to be the key thing. Look, a 2.9 GPA isn't failing. It often means they were smart enough, definitely, but maybe they were putting their time and energy elsewhere. Side businesses, networking, learning practical skills, things like that. We shouldn't confuse maybe academic disinterest with a lack of actual intelligence. Getting rich based on these sources seems to be much more about psychology and, crucially, about taking action.
Okay, let's unpack this. So our mission for this deep dive, we're going to explore 3 specific psychological barriers. These are things that often seem to hold back really intelligent people from hitting their financial potential. And then, importantly, we'll give you 3 concrete actions you can start using today. Right, let's get into the first barrier. It's all about confidence. Or, maybe more accurately, having confidence at the wrong time. Or not having it at the right time. This brings us to the dunning-kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger. It's fascinating how it can actually spur people into action. It's that psychological quirk where people who know very little about something, they tend to massively overestimate how competent they are.
Yeah.
They genuinely don't know enough to see how hard it might be.
The source has had a great example for this, kind of funny too. Studies showing 93% of Americans think they're above average drivers.
93%, which is, statistically impossible.
Right.
But that impossible belief, that simple confidence, even if it's misplaced, that's the spark. It's that, yeah, I can do this. How tough can it be?
Yeah.
Feeling. It lets people who maybe know less just take the first step. They launch the company, start the project, commit to it publicly.
Okay, now contrast that with the typically smart person. You think about a new venture, maybe a career shift, maybe a side hustle, and immediately you're trapped in what one source called the 316 tabs open scenario.
Oh, I know that feeling, yeah.
You spend weeks, maybe months, researching every possible angle, every risk, trying to find the absolute perfect way to start.
And that lands you squarely in analysis paralysis.
Yeah.
You spend so much time thinking about doing the thing, perfecting that first move, that you never actually do the thing. The core idea here, when you understand all the complexity, just getting started can feel overwhelming. Imperfect action, just starting, consistently beats perfect planning that never happens.
Okay, so if analysis paralysis stops people from even starting, the second barrier tackles what happens next. It's about how intelligent people perceive risk and how that might blind them to, well, less conventional paths.
This one really hit home for me, and the source material echoed it. It described working with these incredibly bright, Ivy League educated colleagues in finance. Super sharp people, and they'd spend hours talking about quitting their jobs they hated, to start their own businesses. They had the brains, the ideas, but nothing happened. Months would go by, same job, same complaints, still planning. Meanwhile, you meet successful entrepreneurs, and often they didn't have that fancy academic background. Some didn't even go to college.
So it seems like that planning ability, that theoretical boldness you might show in a safe space like a classroom, it just evaporates when there's real skin in the game, when actual money's on the line.
Exactly. And there's maybe a deep evolutionary reason for this. Think back to hunter-gatherer times. Intelligence was a survival tool, right? Hear Russell in the bushes. The smart hunter was probably the cautious one. The one who overestimated the risk, yelled run, and got out of there.
Yeah.
They survived. They passed on those cautious genes. The ones who were less cautious maybe stayed to check it out. Well, they might have become lunch.
That evolutionary wiring makes so much sense. It basically conditioned us. The safe, predictable path is the survival path. But today's world is just vastly different. Taking a financial risk, or a professional one, assuming it's legal, of course isn't going to get you eaten by a lion.
The stakes are completely different now. What's the worst that usually happens? You might lose some time, maybe some money. Your reputation takes a hit. These are setbacks, sure, but they're manageable. Yet that old cautious instinct persists. It pushes smart people towards the safe route. How many people do you know who took the stable corporate job because it felt like the sensible, responsible thing to do, only to find themselves, 20 years later, bored and feeling stuck? The real risk was maybe stagnation.
Right. Conventional thinking leads to conventional outcomes. Pretty simple, really. If you want something different, something maybe disproportionately successful, you probably need an unconventional approach. The smart person often overestimates the risk today. The person who succeeds, maybe they underestimate it just enough to actually make the leap. Okay, let's move to the third barrier. This one feels very personal. It's about identity, specifically the fear of looking stupid.
Uh-huh. This is a really heavy way for people who grew up being told, you're the smart kid.
Yeah.
That label, that external validation, being seen as smart, always being right, it becomes part of their core self-image.
So if that's your foundation, the idea of trying something risky, starting a business, putting a project out there, and failing publicly, in front of friends, family, maybe even online, that's terrifying. It's not just about losing money then. It feels like an attack on who you fundamentally are. I'm the smart one.
And studies back this up strongly. Research shows kids praised constantly for just being smart. They're actually more likely to duck challenging tasks later on. Why? Fear of failing, fear of losing that smart status. It's like the weightlifting analogy someone used. You can lift a tiny half-pound dumbbell forever. Feels safe, zero risk. But you won't build any muscle. Real growth needs heavier weights, needs difficulty. And difficulty always comes with the risk of, well, maybe stumbling in public.
And that's where the person who maybe wasn't labeled the genius growing up might actually have an edge. They don't carry that same baggage, that burden of expectation. They have less status to protect.
Exactly. They're often underestimated, which kind of ironically can be a huge motivator. They want to prove people wrong. For them, it feels like it's mostly upside. They're focused on getting the thing done, while the person protecting their smart identity might be more focused on, well, not looking dumb. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're listening and maybe some of this resonates, the analysis paralysis, the risk thing, the fear of failure, we need to shift gears now. We've talked about the barriers. Let's get practical. Let's talk about 3 tools, 3 actions you can take to start overcoming these hurdles.
All right, action number 1. This is a big one, I think. We need to embrace what we could call a B+ mentality. Seriously, stop chasing the A+ perfection on everything. As the sources pointed out, perfectionism. It's often just procrastination in disguise. The B+ approach is the direct counter to that analysis paralysis we talked about.
Yeah, think about that mountain climbing analogy again. Let's flesh it out a bit. 2 climbers at the bottom. The smart one. They're deep in the details. Weeks spent studying maps, reading manuals, analyzing weather reports for months ahead, picking the perfect boots.
Meanwhile, the other climber, the supposedly dumb one, they grab some decent boots and just start climbing.
Right. The smart person is still at base camp, optimizing step 1. The other person, they're already partway up the mountain. Sure, maybe they've slipped, made a few wrong turns, but they're learning invaluable stuff by doing, stuff you just can't get from a manual.
Imperfect action teaches you things that pure research never will. You learn and adjust on the fly. If you struggle with this, needing everything perfect before you start, the sources mention some useful books. The Practice, Show Your Work, Getting Things Done, the common thread. Just ship the work. Get it out there, even if it's not perfect yet. B+ is often good enough to get going.
Okay, action number 2. Find and really lean into your comparative advantage. Let's be clear. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It takes a certain kind of personality, and that's totally okay. Financial success isn't only about starting your own company. It's about figuring out what you do significantly better than the average person, and then focusing your time and energy right there, in that niche.
That's a great point. The example used was a really talented, well-regarded plumber. They can easily earn more and maybe have a better life than, say, a mediocre lawyer who's miserable in their job. It's about alignment, not just prestige, right? If you pick a path only for the status or the supposed stability, but it doesn't actually fit your strengths, you're probably going to underperform compared to someone who's genuinely passionate and suited for their work.
Absolutely. And if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure what my core strengths really are. The source has recommended some tools, things like Gallup's Clifton Strengths Assessment or the VIA Character Strength Survey. These can give you some really useful insights into where your natural talents lie, where you have that edge.
Okay, action number 3. And this one. This might be the hardest shift for a typically analytical person. You need to learn to avoid the heavier weight.
Yeah, this comes from doing a kind of pain analysis. Think about it. Whatever you choose, staying put in your current situation or making a big change is going to involve some kind of discomfort, some kind of pain. If you stay, you might feel the pain of stagnation, of regret down the line, of things feeling kind of, If you leave, if you try something new, you face the pain of uncertainty, the risk of failure, maybe judgment from others. Both paths have their own flavor of difficulty.
So the question becomes, which pain do you choose? Here's the test. Really try to picture your life 5 years from now, then 10 years, maybe even 15. Look at that future you and ask yourself honestly, which pain would sting more? The pain of knowing you stayed exactly where you are right now, maybe held back by analysis, by caution, or the pain of having pushed yourself, having tried something outside your comfort zone, even if it meant some bumps, maybe even a public stumble.
That comparison, that future projection, that can be incredibly clarifying. Often you realize the potential pain of regret of not trying feels much, much heavier than the potential pain of trying and maybe failing temporarily. It kind of forces you to use those analytical skills not to procrastinate, but for like strategic self-reflection.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, at the end of the day, what this deep dive really highlights is a needed shift, moving away from relying only on intellectual analysis as the engine for success and moving towards decisive action, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect. Academic smarts give you great tools, sure, but practical success, that seems to require the guts to actually use those tools, maybe clumsily at first.
So we really want to encourage you, if you have even the smallest feeling, that little inkling inside, that you want to do more, try something different, launch that project, explore that career change, finally act on that idea you've been researching forever. Just take the jump.
And think about this. What does it all really mean for you? Consider the absolute rock bottom worst case scenario. If you try something professionally risky, something not illegal or life-threatening, and it doesn't work out, what happens? You probably end up, well, pretty much right back where you are now. You still have your skills, your knowledge, your baseline ability to earn a living, plus some new experience. So when you think about it that way, what risk are you really avoiding by just staying put?